So welcome to another Thursday on the Pagan Perspective. I am Wicca, and this week we have been talking about a whole multitude of questions. I went ahead and took some notes on how to, for me, on kind of reorganizing it, just for a way that makes more sense to my brain. And that really starts with the name, because that was addressed kind of twice. And really, so what do we call ourselves? So I call myself a pagan. I occasionally will use the term Wicca. I don't personally identify as a Wiccan, but it is a term that is more known. It's something that folks sort of kind of have an idea what it is. So it's an easy, quick way to communicate that. I'll also, if there's a form that I'm filling out and it actually has a box for Wiccan, I'd rather click or check Wiccan than other. And what do we think that what we call ourselves should be based on? I think that names are meant to communicate ideas. So sometimes the historical fact behind the names is relevant and is very powerful. Sometimes not as much. So I think it's kind of a balancing act of saying, what are you trying to communicate and how do you communicate what it is you're trying to communicate? Sometimes we choose to use names in order to reclaim those names. Witchcraft or witches, for instance, is something that a lot of folks really want to reclaim as a positive and powerful thing, as opposed to a bad and evil and lesser thing. So really, what's the intention for you? I use pagan because it's very general. It doesn't really say, I believe this, this, and this. It is a broad thing that for me is about, it does have a little bit to do with the root of the word being pagan, of the country, which country is the earth, and for me my path is really about, or my beliefs really, is that I am part of nature, not separate. And that's really the fundamental root of it. So the next part to move into, a lot of these questions really dealt with what is right and what is wrong. A lot of, is it what's right for, what is wrong to believe in a first world country? Is it okay for us to dictate beliefs? Is it not? And so I want to say that I don't believe that there is a universal right and wrong. I think that right and wrong is a construction of our species, and other species, I suppose, as well, to a certain extent. Right and wrong is a thing of morals, which in part come from our genes. There's an extent which is actually programmed into us as a species, such as the idea of reciprocity. That seems to be something very innate to us, and to other social primates and other social creatures to a certain extent, here on Earth at least. Who knows who else is out there. But so there's an innate morality, but there's then also what we build on top of that with our cultures. And from there, we decide what is right and wrong within that context. I don't think that outside of that context, there is a right and wrong. Of course, it's going to be a little bit different. There's some universal stuff that's human, but then each culture has a little bit of, it's different what's right and what's wrong. And then underneath the culture, there's also, you know, the specific smaller groups, family groups, and individuals that also have their idea of right and wrong. one thing that's really relevant to all of this is that the culture that we live in, the big one, right? Because we come from a lot of different cultures, but the overarching one really values individualism right now. Specifically, the one that I'm from is very focuses quite a bit on individualism, and I think that a lot of neo-paganism groups really do as well, and that's one of the things that probably attracted a lot of people to paganism, is the focus on individualism, the focus on making those choices for yourself. To a certain extent though, because the next topic really is it right, do we have the right to dictate other people's beliefs or beliefs to them? Now, by answering this question, there only really is one answer. Because so is it right to dictate the beliefs? To basically to tell somebody else what to believe, as in what is right and wrong? Well, if I answer that, then I'm doing that. So if I say no, I'm still actually saying yes, because I'm telling you it's not okay to do that, but that in itself is doing what I'm saying it's not okay to do. So I'm going to say that it happens. Whether I'm going to say it's right or wrong, it happens. Because we're all the time, we're telling other people what to believe. How many times have you heard, no, no, honey, we don't hit, we use our words? Hundreds, thousands of times probably, something to that effect. We are raised being told, whether with words or with actions, how to look at the world, what the world is. We're conditioned. And so now I'm not saying the free will doesn't exist. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that we exist within a culture, and that culture really shapes how we see the world. So I think it's more of a question of to what degree is it okay to tell people what to believe? And again, when I'm saying tell, I'm not just using, I'm not just talking about words, I'm talking about communicating to them. And that's going to depend on a lot of different things. But specifically, that's going to depend on your values. And values, again, are something that come from how you were raised, right? The culture that you come from actually gave you values. And also from your personal experiences and how you interpreted those personal experiences, which of course is impacted by what your values are from your culture. So it's, it's all this tangled up, interconnected thing. But my values, I highly value individualism, while recognizing that that was something that to a very large extent, comes from my upbringing, comes from my culture and my country. But I also have other values. I very strongly value the health of our planet. I value the health of our communities. I mean, we can just keep on going. And it's this balancing act between, yes, individualism, but also this other thing. So how do you balance that? And I don't have a blanket answer for what I do. My belief is that that's something that each person decides for themselves, and something that we decide on a societal level. So how does that actually apply to paganism? And I think that common ground that the viewer asked about or mentioned really is our really intense focus or increased focus on individualism. Our focus on deciding for ourselves what's right and what's wrong. Now, of course, with everything that I've said, I think that that happens within the context of our society. And so I think that we will change as society that we're part of, that's around us, changes. And I think that we will have an impact on society. And it will be really interesting to see, well, I guess we won't actually see it because we have too short of a lifespan, but for historians, it'll be interesting to see what impact, you know, our little group, I guess we're not really that little, but our group has on society and society's values. Because that scale changes happen from the society deciding to change its values happens, I think, because individuals decide to change their values. So I wanted to talk about all of this, all of those topics, before getting into the more specific ones that the viewer asked about in terms of, you know, suicide and sacrifice and all of that, because those answers are within the context of what I've just talked about. So, yeah, I guess let's start with what the list is. The first one is sacrifice. Sorry, the lens on that has an automatic cutoff time period, sorry. But anyways, so sacrifice, what we tend to think about is, you know, the virgin being sacrificed to the great ancient god, or you know, sacrificing a lamb or something like that, which very much is an accurate description of that. But in my life, one of the accurate descriptions for it, I think about sacrifice more in terms of choosing to give up something that I value in order to get something else. A very mundane example would be I sacrifice personal time to plant trees along the river, or, you know, because I value the ecosystems along that river that rely on the trees and the whole system, and I'm going to give something up that's important to me in my personal time in order to get that. So that's what I think about in terms of sacrifice. But if we go back to the sacrifice in terms of the more colorful description of it, I don't really mind it. Well, okay, I mind human sacrifice because I am a speciesist, as I would be willing to wager almost every single one of you who's watching this is as well. And I will demonstrate this for you. Imagine that you are driving along on the highway and a little bug hits your windshield. It probably doesn't feel very good. You probably feel really sad. Or maybe not even really sad. You're just kind of like, oh, that's too bad. But just think about how you feel for a moment. Now, you're driving along the highway and you run over a rabbit. Think about the difference between how that feels to run over a rabbit than to hit a moth. Even more so, imagine it was a dog or a cat. Like how, I mean, for me, I've never hit a dog or a cat, but I've hit a rabbit and I felt miserable about it. But I can't even imagine hitting a human. Like that would stay with me for years, for my entire life, the guilt and the pain that I would feel for having taken a human's life. Not that I don't think that there are times that it's that it isn't appropriate, but you know, such as self-defense. But the feeling, the emotional connection that we have is different, and that's speciesism. I don't think it's bad. I think it's quite natural. So, anyways, I would have a huge problem with actually sacrificing a human. If you are also eating that animal, and you are also, you know, actually using it, if you aren't just killing it because you want to do some like fun ritual, to me that isn't enough, right? I think it's important to really respect other animals and respect other life. Bloodletting, I don't really know if anybody is still doing that. My understanding of what bloodletting is, or was somewhat of a, it was a medical technique which was not particularly effective, that was used. I don't really know if perhaps there's something more to it than what I'm familiar with. Suicide, so either personal or group, or homicide. Now, homicide is an interesting term because it's actually a very specific kind of killing. It's not just killing a human, because if you accidentally kill somebody, that's manslaughter. It's not homicide if it's self-defense. It's not homicide if you are a soldier obeying the orders of your government. It's homicide when you are intentionally killing somebody who you don't have permission to kill. So I don't think that's okay. I think that that's something that we have very clearly said is not okay in today's world. We have laws that say don't do that. And also just the level of respect that we have for other individuals. When it comes to suicide, with group suicide, really bothers me because I don't like, I have a problem with cult personalities. They really bug me. And the manipulation of people, and I don't think that it's often done with the best intentions for the people involved. I think it really lacks that respect. And then personal suicide, well, first off, I don't think it should be legal. I think that people should be able to do what they want with their own lives. Especially in cases where, you know, they have a terminal disease, and they would rather go out strong than suffering through that. Now there's also, we have a huge problem with suicide that stems from depression, especially in our young people, especially in some of our minority groups, which I think is huge and tragic, and that's something that we really need to address, both as a society and individuals, because I'm sure, I've lost people to suicide. I'm sure almost everyone watching this knows somebody or knew somebody who has taken their own life, and I think that, you know, I think it's tragic, really, and so anything that we can do, I think, is important. And also, I hated this when people told this to me as a teenager, but it's true, at least within my experience, is that it really does get better. So I guess that's a message. On a happier topic, the next one is things that go against physics. So I assume they were trying to get at, like, you know, floating things or ghosts or that sort of thing. But what is physics? So physics aren't these laws that everything has to obey. Physics is how we describe the way that we think the world works. So if we see something that is happening that isn't following those laws of physics, then we have a couple different options. One is the possibility that we aren't actually, what's going on is not actually what we are interpreting it as. Another is that, well, it is happening, so we need to go back and reevaluate physics. So when you say, okay, let's adjust, and we're doing this all the time, say that is different, but we see this happening over and over again, so let's adjust this rule, which is really just a description over here, to fit how we see what's going on with the world. So I don't think that if something is happening that goes against physics, then our definition of physics is faulty and we need to readdress that. Let me see if I missed. I think I've pretty much directly or indirectly covered everything in this. I hope that this topic has been easy enough to follow, and again, I apologize for using the notes and making it such a long video. But what do you guys have to think about these topics? Let us know below. So have a great week, and I think subs week next week, and then another month of great topics.